Good morning. With the help of Hashem, we are learning Yerushalmi Meiser Sheni, Perek Aleph Halacha Gimel. We're learning today Daf Yud, which is the final complete daf of the first chapter. We're starting on Daf Tes Amud Beis quickly by the Gemara to review the last piece that we learned yesterday. So first of all, in Halacha Gimel, in this last Mishnah of this Perek, the Mishnah differentiated that in some cases, when it spoke about someone using Meiser Sheni funds inappropriately. So we said that we were machalik, that if what was purchased was done b'shoigig, person did not know that it's Meiser Sheni funds, the person did not know that you should lechatchila not use Meiser Sheni funds outside Yerushalayim, then we applied the concept of mekach tos. If it was done b'mezid, then the halach is otherwise. Other cases that the Mishnah gave was, you did something inappropriate, yoichal kenegdon. Yochel Kenegdon sounds like a knas. Really, we learned yesterday in Kedushin Bavli, Daf Nun Vav, Machlekes Rashi Toisus. We're not going to review that right now. But we left off, we're going to quickly review it inside, by the Gemara asking very simple, why don't we have consistent rules? L'chu'ura, whenever Meiser Sheni funds were used in a non-ideal manner, even if b'mezid it's going to be effective, why don't we always say that had the person known, he wouldn't have done it? But we don't do that in the Mishnah. That was the Gemara's question. We're going to learn the answer that we learned yesterday. We're going to learn a second answer. We're going to clarify who said what. And from there on Daf Yud, the Gemara is going to move on to analyze the 4 food types that our Mishnah spoke that one may not use Meiser Sheni funds, period. And that was Mayim, Melach, peiros that are still mechuber lakarka, and peiros that you are buying outside Yerushalayim, but in addition to that, she'enam yocholim lahagia Yerushalayim. The Mishnah says, loy kana maser. And as we will see, that it's a machlokes tanoim between Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Yishmael, all based on the klal o prato klal. No one is going to use the ribui miut ribui, but even just the klal o prato klal, the way it's going to be formulated in our Gemara, and there will be a way of learning the pasuk and the a, but often that even more items are excluded, like fish, like mushrooms, as we will see in the Gemara. And obviously, our Mishnah not mentioning those items doesn't follow that way of learning the klal uprat uklal. Now, what we will have fascinating after we're going to begin today's daf, and everything is predicated, everything that we learned yesterday was predicated on a rule, which, by the way, is correct, is the halacha, that Meiser Sheni funds, lechatchila, should only be used to buy food in Yerushalayim, not outside Yerushalayim. Really? That's going to be subject to a machlokes amoraim. There's going to be a beautiful back and forth. Not only that, we're going to go back to how we began yesterday on top of our daf tes. If you remember, there was a braisa, and the braisa spoke about echad shvi'is, which means money from shvi'is produce. The echad funds of Meiser Sheni. So we had a machlokes, Rav Meir and the Chachamim. Rav Meir says that you can only use the funds. That you cannot buy and the keva that's tmima. That will be the worst of the worst, as we explained, because then the baby will have, then the nekeva can have children. Let's go with, and if it has children, you might not eat it on that year, or you're not going to treat it with the kedusha of Meiser Sheni that it has, whichever way you're going to learn. But Rav Meir says you are allowed to buy and nekeva's balamum. Rav Meir even writes you can buy a male animal, even if it's a tamim, va'al shar behema, and certainly chayev va'oif. Bein Chaim, Bein Shchutim, and the Chachamim, which is what we also the sheet of our Mishnah, they hold that no, that Meiser Sheni funds can only be used if you're buying meat, basar shchuta. Okay, and that was actually the raya to the second version, b'shem Rabbi Yechanan. What we will learn today is that this entire brisa is only speaking about using Meiser Sheni funds outside Yerushalayim, and that's going to change a lot. Not so much, Ben, again, the conversation we had yesterday, but concerning our topic of whether you have to lechatchila use the funds of Meiser Sheni in Yerushalayim. Again, we will have in today's Gemara, the maskana of today's Gemara will be that you can buy it outside Yerushalayim. We're going to see a couple of nuances in that. And the final topic that we'll have in today's daf is the following. Now, Chevra, I know that we spoke about this when we learned the Mishnah yesterday. Let me repeat the following. Number one, when there isn't yet the Beis HaMikdash, one is always obligated to separate Meiser Sheni. That's number one. Now, this goes B'chlal. If Meisris is only Midrabanan, it's Midrabanan. If the obligation of separating Meisris, let's go by the fact that most of the Jewish people are currently living in Israel, if it isn't yet, it's about to happen, maybe it already happened, then you're Chayiv Midoiraisa, according to most opinions. Whichever. But you're Chayiv to separate Meiser Sheni, even though you can't eat it when there's no Beis HaMikdash. But you have to separate it. Number two, even pre the third Beis HaMikdash, one is able to redeem the peiros meiser sheni onto money, no doubt, and that's exactly what we do. The question is, when there isn't a Beis HaMikdash, which means that you cannot eat the peiros, even if you're going to deconsecrate the coins on peiros, are you allowed to deconsecrate the coins on peiros? Are you allowed to do it? Now, don't forget, our Mishnah said that if you bought an animal, since you can't eat it, yirkavu. Yirkavu, not only the basar, even the oil. But we're almost skipping a step. Are you able to deconsecrate it? And really, it's subject to Amachlekes Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. That will be the final topic if we'll get there today. Chavre, let's dive right inside. We have a larger daf. So we're going back to Daf Tesamid Beis. The Gemara is asking, Taman Tanina, this is quoting the ending of the Mishnah. Where the Mishnah says that ein loikchin, the examples the Mishnah gives is avodim, nor karkois, nor behema tameya. This is, by the way, inside Yerushalayim, outside Yerushalayim. Can't do that. And bidmei, the girsa is meiser sheni, and the Mishnah writes, and if you made such a purchase, yoichal kenegdon. The Mishnah did not say b'shoigeg mekachtos, right? We could have said the same logic. We don't say that. Sale is a sale always. Elamai yoichel kenegdon l'Rashi l'toisvis. However you learn pshat. The problem is that is the end of the Mishnah. But towards the beginning of the Mishnah, when the Mishnah spoke about someone buying animals outside Yerushalayim, buying produce sheyecholim lahagia Yerushalayim, outside Yerushalayim, there the Mishnah differentiated. If it's b'shoigeg, then mekachtos, only b'mezid. Why? Why this inconsistency? So the Gemara says, Rabbi Yoina says, two Amoraim gave two different answers. Ispalgun, on one hand, Rab Chiar Bar Yosef, who said one of the following two, and Shmuel, who said the other of the following two. Which one said which? We'll find out soon. But first, what was said? Chad Amar, this is where we left off yesterday, in the beginning of the Mishnah, where we allow the mekachtos to be very helpful to some level. You can say helpful for the likeach that doesn't have to go out of pocket. That's derech mechira. Derech mechira means that the way the person bought peiros outside Yerushalayim was he went into a store and he gave money and he took the produce. He never used the statement of let me deconsecrate the kedusha of the money on the produce. It was a normal sale. There's a rule by sales bigger than our topic that at times, whether it's the lekeach, whether it's the moichad, if there was information that they did not know at the time and later comes to light, and they say, hey, if I would have known, for sure I wouldn't have made this transaction, we say that the transaction is completely voided, mekachtos. So when it's done derech mechira, so there's an option to say mekachtos. That is where the Mishnah differentiates. Shoygeg mezit. Kan. But in the ending of the Mishnah, you bought avodim, just as an example. The Mishnah never said that if you bought an eved b'shoigeg mekachtos, you know why? That's only because it was derech chilul. Derech chilul doesn't mean you didn't buy it. Either it means that you owned the eved and you had the money. It can also mean that. And you made a declaration, made the kedusha of the meiser sheni go into the eved. There, it's ineffective. There's no mekachtos. I'm going to Rashi. No, or I'll tell you better. This is important for the next Amud. Derech chilul can even mean a sale. But listen to this. If a person, prior to the sale, let's say I have Mois Meiser Sheni, you own the Evet, and I'm going to make a purchase. Prior to the purchase, if I say, may the Kedusha of my money go into the Evet, may it be transferred into the Evet. Now that we make this chilul, then I make a statement. The money is yours and the evet is mine. That's called derech chilul. Derech chilul means I didn't use the word purchase. I actually verbalized a chilul. When a person makes a chilul, the rule is we can never say mekachtos. In other words, it's a rule that by a purchase, we have an option at times to say, had I known, I wouldn't have done it. By chilul, it doesn't work that way. Even if, had I known, I wouldn't have made the chilul, too late. You made the chilul. Really, chilul there is a Torah halacha that gets involved. By a purchase, it's only the das makna, the das likeach, people.
So and that was only by declaration, Rabbi?
Only by declaration, Yakir. Very good. Chilul is a declaration. And even if I'm buying something from you, but if I wouldn't have made the declaration, the chilul happens through the purchase without me verbalizing it. Stam, I bought it. But if I say I'm being mechalal it, there's a halacha of chilul. Hilchos chilul never is subject to had you known. Even if you would have known and you wouldn't have done it, you did it. You did it. I'll give you al derech and quickly. Al derech, sometimes we say that a person can retract toich kedei dibur. Sometimes. In some halachas, you cannot retract toich kedei dibur. I see a similarity to that. Chilul doesn't allow for undoing. If you said it, it's done. By a purchase can be undone. Okay, that's answer number one. Now, that's a very significant answer. Because really what this answer is saying, that if, let's go to the case where the Mishnah did not give you the option of shoygeg umezid, where you bought avadim. Mishnah is saying that if you actually made a normal purchase of an evet without using the words chilul, and a chanami, if you did it b'shoygeg, then the whole transaction is void. Answer number one. Answer number two, Daf Yud on the top, one of the other two Amoraim, again, we don't know who, whether it was Rabbi Chia bar Yosef or Shmuel, Charna Amar, another difference. And I know Alex is not here right now, but this is what Alex spoke about. Kan shahamoicher kayam. When the Mishnah allows b'shoygeg, you can undo it. There's another step needed. How would you undo it? You have to find the moicher. Undoing the transaction means that the money in my pocket is not my money. And the items are their items. But for that, you have to actually go back to the moicher and give back the money and get back your item. You can only do it, this is a technical thing. When the moicher is kayam, that is where we allow abishoygeg mekachtos in the parts of the Mishnah, towards the end of the Mishnah, by the case of avadim and karkois, right? V'kan shalach le'amoicher. I love the answer. Halach le'amoicher. What good? Why would we say mekachtos? How would that help? Wouldn't help. Okay. Now, V'lo Yodan, initially, we didn't know which answer was given by whom. But then the Gemara says, hold on, we discovered that later, at some point. Min man do Amar Rabbi Yosi b'shem Shmuel. Okay? And that was regarding the case of the Mishnah of Yoichal Kenegdan. The statement of Shmuel was regarding the case of Yoichal Kenegdan. That he says the words nikna hamekach, that the buyer keeps the item. From those words, hadohu da amar, kan derech mechila, v'kan derech chilul. This is very important. Look inside the Marafulda, 2-3 lines from the top. If Shmuel would have been the one that would have said the second answer, which is that be'emes we can always say b'shoygeg mekachtos. The only reason why we don't say it is because the moicher is not here, the is firolei. That it's only if in the seifa of the Mishnah where you bought avadim, where the Mishnah did not say shoygeg, the Mishnah says yechel kenegdem, was only because shahalacha moicher, had that have been Shmuel's approach. But really, but if the moicher is still available, that approach really says that loy nikna hamekach. If the only reason why we don't say shoygeg, undo it, is because since you can't do it, don't say it. It means that essentially there is a mekachtos. The Chachamim were wise when it came to the market. They wanted the market to flow. They made various enactments for things to function. So they said, well, even though really mekachtos, don't apply it. The Chachamim have that koyach. But Shmuel never would have said the words nikna hamekach. That opinion holds not be'emes loy nikna hamekach. Leave things the way they are because ein bereira. Ella, the vadai, Shmuel understands that in the case of the Sefer, the nikna hamekach, period, bein b'shogeg, bein b'mezid. And why I mekach tos is a halacha? Because that part of the Mishnah was speaking about derech chilul. In other words, we proved that the answer that we learned yesterday, that we had on Daf Tes Amud Beis, was given by Shmuel, and Rabbi Bar Yosef was the one that said this practical thing that we always say mekach tos. Elama, if the moicher is not here, the Chazal said, don't say it, an imposed rabbinic decree. Okay. Now, going back to the beginning of our Mishnah, the Mishnah spoke about, again, the Mishnah gave 4 items that may not be purchased with mois, ma'aser sheni, mayim, melach, peiros, mechubarim. I know we learned in the Mishnah yesterday that Asherilio, regarding mayim and melach, we learned the pnei Moshe. Okay, we're going to dive into this. And then, one second, so that mayim, melach, peiros that are mechubar lekarka, and then if peiros, not only were they outside Yerushalmi, but they will not remain edible by the time it gets there, conforming your current means of transportation. Loy kana hamaiser. There was no kinyan. A vadai, there was no deconsecration. There wasn't even a kinyan. So says the Gemara that our Mishnah that only gives 4 examples and not more, our Mishnah must follow the Rabbi Akiva, which by the way is the norm. Stam Mishnah Rav Meir. Rav Meir is one of the Talmidei Rabbi Akiva, so it fits. But anyways, it's only Rabbi Akiva. Our Mishnah is not like Rabbi Yishmael. Now again, I just want to point out that I know that in the Bavli, how many times did we learn? And we say every morning, Rabbi Yishmael oimer b'shloish eser midos klal o prato klal. Rabbi Akiva b'chlal doesn't use those words. He uses riboy, miyut, riboy. For some reason, the Gemara here is not going into it. Both Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Yishmael subscribe to the klal o prato klal. The question is, how do they apply it? How do they use it? And here we have a braisa. That what? Rabbi Shmuel, Darash, just a chazer, the pasuk. Look inside the Torah Eira Shalom. This is a pasuk in Parshas Re'eh, specifically about Ma'aser Sheni. That pasuk already said that kihir chak memcha hamokaim kiloi suchal se'esoi. The Gemara already, the pasuk explicitly says that if you live so far from Yerushalmi that you can't take the produce of Ma'aser Sheni, then you should be machalal it, or you should sell it for fruit, for produce, for food items. That we have. What do you do with the food? So the Torah says, "V'nosata hakesef." This is already when you are in Yerushalmi. That will be the next sugya, today's daf. But let's go the way we learned to the Mishnah. That really, ideally, in Yerushalmi, what should you spend it for? B'choil asher ta'ava nafshecha, right? On whatever your soul desires. That's a very general statement. On whatever your soul desires. Then the Torah says 4 pratim: babakar, 2 batzoin, 3 bayayin, 4 old wine, aged wine, which is the sheikhar here. 4. Okay, that's called the prat. And right afterwards it says ubechoil asher tisholcha nafshecha, another klal. So let's see how they apply it. Back in the Gemara. Rabbi Shmuel Darash, v'nosata kesef b'choil asher ta'ava nafshecha. You should spend the money. Giving the money means spending the money. Because when you spend money, you're giving your money away. Spending the money on whatever your soul desires. That's a klal, whatever. Clear, that's a prat. Now the Torah only gives 4 items, right? The Torah didn't say mayim, mayim not. The Torah said what you could. Sounds like only those 4. But then the Torah gives another klal. Or the vav is not end. Or for anything that your soul asks of you. It's gewaldig. You know, it's the ratzain, the taiva and the ratzin comes from the neshama. Yes, it does.
What's the lashon? Tish'al or tit'ave, Rabbi?
Tish'olcha. The first lashon is ta'ave. The next one is tish'olcha. Maybe, Yakir, that's nice. It's tainug and ratzin. Taiva comes from tainug. I desire that which I have pleasure for. And I ask for that which I want, maybe. Anyways. So now, Hare klal acher. Again, the pasuk ends with another klal. So Taich interprets Rabbi Yishmael klal upratu klal. that we know already from the Yud Gimel Midos. And the rule is I atadon el ke'ena prat. So yeah, you can buy many more items. It's not only bakar tzayin yayin or shechar. You can include many others, but they have to be similar to the prat. How? Loimar loch ma haprat mefoirish davar shu vlad valdoy sa'aretz. It's a vlad valdoy sa'aretz, not the words we had yesterday in the Pnei Moshe, primi pri, that we'll interpret today. How do you interpret vlad valdoy sa'aretz? Big question. But let's go with today with Pnei Moshe. I went yesterday. It's very nuanced. So Daf Yud on the top, 4 lines from the top. The last wide line before the Gemara. That ma haprat mefoirish vlad valdoy sa'aretz, which means that something that's a product of that which God created during the 6 days. I'm sorry. That a product of the earth that God created in the creation. A product from the Aretz. What does that mean, a product from the Aretz? I'll tell you what that means. God created the earth. God commanded for the earth to sprout forth all vegetation. That's in the Chumash. God commanded for the earth to give forth behemoths, chayas. But the fish did not come from the earth. God commanded the waters to give forth fish. Amazing. And run to the Pnei Moshe. Vlad valdois haaretz, a product of the earth. Shenivru min haaretz b'maisa bereishis. And what does Rabbi Shmuel? He'll say that explicitly soon. Ulafuke dagim. Why is that? Because the bodies of the fish came from the water. The mimaya ivru. And he goes further. Chagavim, grasshoppers, they were created from mud. Mud is not only earth. Earth and water. Mirakak nivru'u. And it has to be a vlad ha'aretz, something that's growing off the earth. And what does that exclude? Also, the kameinu pitriois, mushrooms and truffles, einam gedelim ba'aretz. Amazing. Okay, so that, keep your finger, my friends, on the Pnei Moshe. We are now 9 lines from the top, and on the other, that's why Hashem gave us 2 hands and 2 fingers. My Rebbe told me that. 1 for the Gemara, 1 for Rashi. Here it's 1 for the Gemara, 1 for the Pnei Moshe. So like that. Ma prat mefaydish davar shuvlad v'aldei sa'aretz. So af einli elo davar shuvlad v'aldei sa'aretz. Okay, that is Rabbi Shmuel. So he actually excludes items that our Mishnah did not mention. Dagim, chagavim, Kameim and Pitriyos. To me, the same thing would be with oifus. I don't know why they don't mention it. Birds also are a mixture of the earth and the water, but he speaks only about grasshoppers. Rab Akiva mefaresh, also klal prato klal, but he says like this: Ma haprat mefaresh. Let's go slowly. Davar shuhu pri. Davar shuhu pri means something that grows. That's the way we're going to teach it. And also, Vlad Pri means it came from the fruit. We'll see soon, right? Wine came from the fruit. And Umachshire Pri, it adds something to food. It's an enhancer of food. Now, by the way, melach is an enhancer of food. But this is important. Let Rabbi Akiva, for something to be included in the klal or prato klal, it has to have at least 2 out of these 3 characteristics. If it only has 1 of the 3, it won't be included. What are the 3? Nothing needs all 3. You need 2 out of the 3, which is it has to be something that grows. Okay, something that grows is not going to be salt. Salt is what it is. It's a mineral, like the earth. It is. It has to be a product of fruit. It's not salt. Again, it's a product of the ground. It's not a pri mi pri. An apple is a pri mi pri. And the machshire pri. That salt is, but it's only one of the 3. Af ainli elo davar shuhu, like we mentioned, even though he's saying all 3, it doesn't have to be all 3. 2 out of the 3 is good. Shu pri and velat pri and or u machshire pri. Look inside and now. something that enhances food. I want to read inside the Mara folder that spoke out about the salt, about this nuance. Not all three, but 2 out of the 3. Umachshere Peres, it's a third from the top, around 12 lines from the top in the Mara folder. Hainu shemachshirim sha'ara Peres lachila, something that enhances other foods, which means it gives to them tam. So now the kasha is, if one of the 3 is machshirei pri, va'afal gav de melach nami noisen tam, but it's not a pri. I want to add, nor is it a velat pri. Now, where does Rabbi Akiva argue with Rabbi Shmuel? So the Marafulda speaks out. According to Rabbi Akiva, you are allowed to buy kemeinu pitriyos. Why can you buy mushroom and truffles? They grow, and they enhance. 2 out of the 3. Umachshirei pri.
Why do we assume that they grow? This is a lachluchit.
The fact that they grow, unlike water doesn't grow. It is. It can be here, it can be in the heavens, it can come back down. Mushroom and truffles, they grow. They grow. It's not something that it is what it is. It's like us. It becomes bigger, it becomes smaller. It's not static. It's not a doimim. It's not still.
Well, in Florida, they can find people growing mushrooms. Don't understand.
The Gabbai is speaking about one mushrooms. The Gemara is speaking about other mushrooms, even though yesh bechlal masha befrat. Okay, now the Gemara says, "My nafik min beinein." What's the nafkamina between Vlad Valdoy Saaretz? Period. Or the 3. So the Gemara says, "Dagim." We already learned the Pnei Moshe. Dagim v'chagavim k'meim u'pitrios. Kid Rabbi Akiva. According to Rabbi Akiva, they are allowed to be bought with kesef meiser. Kid Rabbi Yishmael einam nilkachim. Since our Mishnah only mentions mayim melach, peiros that are mechuba lekarkan, then that other thing peiros that you bought outside Yerushalmi, that will never reach Yerushalmi, those are the 4 that may not be bought. So the Mishnah is implying that fish is allowed to be bought. V'chulei is that ayah that our Mishnah beautiful. Our Mishnah follows Rabbi Akiva, not Rabbi Yishmael. Okay.
Our Mishnah is all-inclusive in what you cannot buy.
Our Mishnah is all-inclusive in what you cannot buy, even though there's a general rule that there's always exceptions, but these are too many exceptions. Okay. Now, let's go back to the case of the Mishnah, that if you bought produce that will reach Yerushalmi.
According to the penis, you can't buy fish. Not live fish, but like a
you can't.
Market, you
cannot buy it, even though it's oichel. Yes, that's right. Because flesh comes from animals that come from the earth, and fish comes from the water. You have a whole Torah in Chassidus. That's why it's so much easier to make fish kosher. You don't even have to shecht it.
Why?
Because water is already more attached. Water represents that which is attached to God. It's alma discassia. There's no division. Farther away, the harder it is to elevate. Okay, anyways, coming back over here. So the Mishnah said, and we began today's share, the case in the Mishnah where if you bought fruits outside Yerushalayim, but it will reach Yerushalayim. Or the Mishnah says if you bought living animals outside Yerushalayim, those were the cases of the Mishnah. So the Mishnah says, it depends, right? That was also B'shoigeg, Mekachtos, B'mezid, Yoichal connected. That is what the Mishnah said. Now, as we mentioned when we learned the Mishnah, as we mentioned today in our words of introduction, that sounds from our Mishnah, and indeed what we're saying now is the halacha, but we're going to have a lot of pushback today to the extreme, that lachatchila mo'ois ma'aser sheni should only be used to purchase whatever you are allowed to purchase inside Yerushalayim. And that's what the Mishnah says. If you bought fruit outside Yerushalayim, remember, there's a mekachtos. What's the mekachtos? The way we were learning pshat. Had you known that you had mois ma'aser sheni, or had you known that you should lachatchila not buy peiros outside Yerushalayim, you wouldn't have done it. Why not? Because you're not allowed to. And that's exactly what Rab Chagai is saying. Amar Rab Chagai, that masnisa Amar Okain. This is what our Mishnah is trying to say. This is what we learn implied from the Mishnah. That she'ein mechalal in mo'is al ha'peiros, that you should not buy 100% legitimate peiros. Primi pri, whatever. Vad valdo sa'aretz. Don't buy apples. If you are berichuk machim simply means outside the walls of Yerushalayim. What Rab Chag is trying to say, look inside the last marafulda before we turn to the Daf Amud Beis. The second to last line from the bottom. What's the mekachtos? The mekachtos is the isur richuk makimhu doloikanu. We say mekachtos because it's usher to do it. Had I known, I wouldn't have violated. And I want to let you know, guys, there can be a whole different way of learning mekachtos. What would be the other way of learning mekachtos? When I make a purchase, let's go to the normal purchase. The kedusha, not chilul, even just a mekach. The kedusha of the money goes on the produce. That means that the loikeach now has to take that produce to Yerushalayim. He has to bring it up. Why do you think this guy took the produce and he put it on money to begin with? Because he didn't want to have to schlep fruit to Yerushalayim. There is a whole other way of learning mekachtos, as we'll see in the next opinion. Really, lachatchila, you can buy produce outside Yerushalayim. You are allowed to do it. But if you did not know that this is mois, ma'aser sheni, then the lekech can say, whoa, had I known, I wouldn't have done it. You have to travel another day to Yerushalayim, or even have another block. Why would I schlep produce if I can schlep money? Money is much easier to carry. That's called mekachtos of hala'ah. This is important. Mekachtos of hala'ah versus mekachtos of isur. Rab Chagai is saying that the mekachtos is a mekachtos that you violated an isur. Had I known, why would I violate? Very good. Daf Yud Amud Beis. So that's what Rab Chagai. Now Rab Chagai opined. What he says really stands at the end of it all, but not on today's daf. Amram Kumei Ravina. When Rab Chagai interpreted the Mishnah in front of Rabbi Avina, the Kalsei Rabbi Avina praised him. You're right. That is the pshat in the Mishnah. Mekachtos, because it's asur. Amra Kumei Rabbi Yirmiyah, again Rabbi Yirmiyah, and Vekantere, and Rabbi Yirmiyah criticized him. You are wrong. Number one, according to Rabbi Yirmiyah, one is allowed to buy peiros if it's the right. It's not ma'im. It's not melach. It's peiros. You are allowed to buy it outside Yerushalmi. There's absolutely no isur. Nothing. So there is a mekach. Of course, there's a mekachtos. The guy can say, I took my original peiros and I put it onto money because I didn't want to have to schlep anything other than a couple of coins in my pocket. Now that I made a purchase, since it's valid, so you have a proper chilul. But now that means that the produce that I bought now is imbued with kedushas ma'aser sheni, which means it may only be eaten in Yerushalayim, which means I have to schlep it there. I never would have done it.
What do you think?
He thought he had money that's chulin, which would allow him to eat the peiros in Motel 6 on the way there. Pashit. That's the mekachtos, not because there is no isur. So Rabbi Yirmiyah criticized Rab Chagai vehotaninon, as we learned in the Mishnah that what? It says befedish. We're going to have this in Daf Chafei, which is ma'ois b'Yerushalayim, that if a person had money in Yerushalayim, we're talking about ma'aser sheni money, and the peiros were outside Yerushalayim, and the Mishnah speaks about a case where a person is saying that these coins in Yerushalayim, which for whatever reason this guy did not want to use for peiros ma'aser sheni. The Mishnah is speaking about a scenario where a man says, may the kedusha of the money go in those peiros which are not even here. That's the case of the Mishnah. The Mishnah is speaking about someone who did something that's lachatchila mutter to do. It's not exactly our case, because in the case of Daf Chafei, the person is in Yerushalayim, his money is in Yerushalayim, but in that case, the person is allowed to say, may the kedusha of this money be mechulal on produce that I have in Tel Aviv. That proves that you can be mechalal it. And by the way, then one would be obligated to take the produce in Tel Aviv and bring it to Yerushalayim. Okay.
Didn't we say in our Mishnah that the issue was that the fruits would rot by the time it got?
That's the first case in the Mishnah. Now we're talking about a case where the fruits won't rot. And the Mishnah says, B'shoigeg, you undo the sale. You're not listening. So why mekachtos? So Rabbi Yerushalmi is saying the mekachtos is not because had you known you wouldn't have done a violation. There is no violation. Had you done it, you wouldn't have put yourself in a position where you have to schlep payers to Yerushalayim. Okay, so now, and Noch Rabbi Yerushalmi has a raya. So the Gemara right away responds, that's not a proof. In the Mishnah Daf Chafei and our Daf Chafei, Shanyehi, Shahoya Echad Bamakoim, which means you are in Yerushalayim. Either your coins or in your produce was in Yerushalayim. The case that I gave was where you were in Yerushalayim and your money was in Yerushalayim. In such a case, you're right. You are allowed to lechatchila deconsecrate it even on Peiros Chutz Yerushalayim. That's not what we're talking about. Here we're talking about where I am outside Yerushalayim. My money is outside Yerushalayim. My produce is outside Yerushalayim. Everyone is outside Yerushalayim. That was the case. And the person not even knowing that the money is Mois Meiser Sheni, or not knowing you're not allowed to do it, if you're going to learn that pshat, he bought produce. And that's Asur. And that is the Mekachtos. Okay, so Bekitzer, Machlekes, Rab Chagai, Rabbi Yirmiyah. Are you allowed to? Are you not allowed to? So says the Gemara, now, even if it's Asur, it doesn't mean it's Ma'akef. That's why we said b'mezid it works, but you violated an isur. Kad nafak Rab Chagai. So after that, so fine, that was a good debate. Rabbi Yirmiyah attempted to refute him. He was unsuccessful. Rab Chagai walked out of the Beis Medrash. Later on, he found a brayso that writes. Now listen to these words: that ma'ois upeiros, if both the money and the fruit are in Yerushalayim, or if both the money and the peiros are b'Medina, which means outside Yerushalayim, then you are allowed to lechatchila deconsecrate. This brayso clearly holds that if the money and the produce is outside Yerushalayim, which is the case of our Mishnah, you can lechatchila do that. So when he read that brayso, Amari said, okay, Rabbi Yirmiyah is right. I hava shemiya Rabbi Yirmiyah hadam milsa. You know what? If Rabbi Yirmiyah in the past learned the brayso, he criticized me. He tried to bring a proof from the Mishnah Daf Chafei. He couldn't have done it from that Mishnah. But you know what? He's right, because maybe in the past he learned the brayso, he might have forgotten it. But since there is such a brayso, Yaus kanterai, he was right to criticize me. And not only that, Rab Chagai says, I'm going to retract my position. Ba'a mechsar bey. Okay. Before he went back to Rabbi Yirmiyah, the Gemara now sticks in. The Gemara says, hold on. That Amalei Rab Ze'eda tells Rab Chagai, whoa, 1 second. Loik tachzer bach. Don't admit that Rabbi Yirmiyah is right. And let's quickly remind ourselves again of the brayso that we had on top of our Daf Tes. That was the machlokes. Forget about the Shviyas part. The Mishnah brayso was also speaking about Mois Meiser Sheni. Rav Meir is the one that says that the only thing you may not buy with it is a nekeva tamima, basically. Right, Danny? And the Chachamim say the only thing you can use the money for is to buy basar shchuta. The Gemara is telling you here without saying it. Now you have to know that entire machlokes Rav Meir and the Chachamim is if you bought it outside Yerushalayim, which is the case of our Mishnah, where the Mishnah says b'shoigeg, then mekachtos. Now that's fascinating. Why is that fascinating? Listen, Amar Rab Ze'eda loy tachzebach, because the Amar Rab Meir v'Rabbanan, because we have a tradition, number one, that's already a given, like I mentioned, that their entire machlokes was about buying an animal outside Yerushalayim, which according to Rab Chagai is asur. And on that, we also, so the question is, how can you b'chlal? If Rab Chagai is right, which he is, according to the Gemara now, how can they even speak about such a case? I'll tell you how. So they interpreted that brayso is speaking about the Mai. If you have the Mai, the whole separation of Meiser Sheni is only a midrabanan. That is where they allowed you to buy food items outside Yerushalayim. And there you have the machlokes. If you're buying an animal, is there or is there not a restriction? V'chulei. Oh, the fact that the Gemara needed to establish that the machlokes Tamein and Rabbanan is by the Mai, why didn't they leave it stam? What are they basically saying? That if it was vadai, which is what we are talking about, then you would not have a machlokes. Why would you not have a machlokes? Because you're right, Rab Chagai, because outside Yerushalayim, B'chlal, you should not be using the money to buy any food items. Forget about that issue of living animals, and maybe you should offer it Zajac Shlamim, Loy Nageya. The fact that we needed to teach the Braisa of Rav Meir and the Rabbanan, which is a given already outside Yerushalayim, only b'demai. Why? Because Vaday Loy. Okay, so good. So Rab Chagai don't retract. The Gemara says you're wrong. You're wrong. You are wrong with your understanding of the Machlekes Rav Meir and the Chachamim. How do I know, guys? Remember, Rabbi Lazar da Amoida was the master in Zerayim. We're going to follow him. Minman, this is a retraction on the attempted backup to Rab Chagai. Minman, the Amar Rabbi Lazar. The fact that Rabbi Lazar said that our Mishnah that's speaking about someone who is using Meiser Sheni funds to buy an animal outside Yerushalayim. What did our Mishnah say? B'mezid. What did our Mishnah say? B'mezid. Then Yoichel Kenegdon. What does that mean? It means that the transaction was holding. So Rabbi Lazar says our Mishnah only follows Rab Meir. Hold on. If Rav Meir and the Rabbanan only spoke about using demai, they themselves, if both of them were to hold that using vadai is prohibited, then Rabbi Lazar never would have said that our Mishnah is following Rav Meir. No, Rav Meir and the Chachamim is only demai. If that would have been correct. The fact that Rabbi Lazar says that our Mishnah, in the case where you bought a live animal outside Yerushalayim, b'mezid, that the transaction is not undone, says Rabbi Lazar, that is only Rav Meir. Because the Chachamim say, b'chlal, you cannot buy if you're buying a meat, it has to be basar shchuta. Outside Yerushalayim. Befedish, we reject the limitation of Rav Meir and the Chachamim only by demai. They are arguing both by demai and by vadai. Because why would Rabbi Lazar say that our Mishnah is only Rav Meir? Rav Meir and the Chachamim should have nothing to do with our Mishnah. If Rav Meir and the Chachamim, debating what type of meat can you buy outside Yerushalayim, are only talking about the Meiser Sheni, because if they both would agree that if it's Vada you may not buy, so then our Mishnah is speaking about someone who bought. Our Mishnah is not speaking about the Mai, our Mishnah is speaking about Meiser Sheni funds Vadai. You can only link it to Rav Meir if Rav Meir is also speaking about Vadai. And what do we see? Bottom line is, what do we see from all of this? That you are allowed to use Meiser Sheni funds Lachatchila outside Yerushalayim. So why is B'shoigeg, what's the Mekachtos? Something else. Mekachtos, because the person would say, had I known, I wouldn't have done it outside Yerushalayim, not to have the trouble, the bother of needing to bring the food or the animal to Yerushalayim. Our Gemara and Daf Testament base concludes that really Rab Chagai should retract to Rabbi Yirmiyah, even though what I'm saying right now is not the end, but that's where we're ending it today. That Meiser Sheni funds is allowed to be used to buy peiros, as long as the peiros will make it to Yerushalayim, or to buy whatever. Lechatchila. That's the maskan of the Gemara today in Daf Testament Beis. And says the Gemara, final topic that we're learning today. I'm happy we have time. So what did the Mishnah speak about? The Mishnah spoke about an animal that was bought inside or outside Yerushalayim with Mo'is Meiser Sheni, Bizman She'ein Beis HaMikdash Kayam, which means you're not allowed to eat it. So the Mishnah said that. We spoke that out yesterday. That when you are deconsecrating the original produce onto money, the money doesn't have to have the value of the produce. Does not need to have that. When you have Mo'is Meiser Sheni, if you're buying produce, you have to buy the value of the Mo'is. And not only that, if you cannot eat the peiros, now why? Because there isn't yet the Beis HaMikdash. When there is no Beis HaMikdash, even if you are within the walls of the holy city, you may not eat it. You have to let it rot, all of it. And that detail, that we don't say havla, so what has to be left to rot? Not only the basar, also the oil. That was the Mishnah. Everything is based on the fact that you actually took Mo'is Meiser Sheni and you bought an animal, Bizman She'ein Beis HaMikdash Kayim. B'chlal, who says you can do that? When there is no Beis HaMikdash, you have to be Mafresh Meiser Sheni. Good. When there is no Beis Hamikdash, even before the building of the Beis Hamikdash, when you have Meiser Sheni produce, you could be paid it, you redeem it on money. Like with the detail, it doesn't even have to have the same value. These two steps, by the way, are done today. But let's go to the next step. Now that you have the money, are you able to, Danny, you know why you should not be able to buy peiros? What did we learn today? Rabbi Kiva, Rabbi Shmuel. What does one use peiros, mo'is meiser sheni for? Right? Venosata kesev. What do you do with it? And you buy something that you can eat. If I'm buying something which I may not eat, not because it's inedible, but because the Torah tells me I may not eat it, I can argue that whole transaction should be null and void, which is Shitas Rabbi Shammai. And indeed, says the Gemara that Rab Zvida have a Yosef Masna Levirei. Rab Zvida was sitting and teaching the Yeah, we'll see in a moment. We didn't learn it yet. Rab Zvida is sitting and learning with the son. How beautiful, teaching him the following Braisa. Daf Yud Aleph. Horoitz Elechalel Mo'ois. Al HaPeiros, whatever Peiros. In Yerushalmi. Bisman Hazeh means prior to the building of the third Beis Hamikdash. Bein Elu, these are his words. Both the money and the produce become imbued with Kedushas Meiser Sheni, Kid Divrei Beis Shammai, following Beis Shammai. Now, 1 second. It's a two-step process. Step number one is, listen to this, like I just mentioned. Since the money is only allowed to be used on edible food, edible doesn't only have to mean physically edible. It equally, maybe even as a yid, more means halachically edible. Since Bisman Hazeh, pre-Beis Hamikdash, you can't eat. If you can't eat it, Beis Shammai holds the whole deconsecration does not work, which means the ma'os remain imbued with Kedushas Meiser Sheni. Step number two, the Chachamim now penalized you. You went ahead and you did something that you should not have done, which is you bought that which is inedible. You shouldn't have done it. I'm going to penalize you. I'm going to say that not only does the money remains holy because it was ineffective. Now I'm going to make whatever it is that you bought also be imbued rabbinically with the Kedusha of Meiser Sheni. That's the meaning of Bein Elu Kachu. And what do? Both the money has to be left to rot. Yama Melech and the produce have to be let to rot. Look inside the second Marafulda. Kachu v'yarkivu. V'af hamois liyotzel l'chulin. And v'kaimonama b'kutushosan. Why? Miknasa derabanan. So holds Beis Shammai. Beis Hillel argues. Beis Hillel oimrim. Mois k'mois shehem. Listen. Beis Hillel is moida so far that the money remains imbued with Kedushas Meiser Sheni. Why? Because you cannot be machalal the ma'os on inedible food. But he doesn't agree with the knas. But at least upeiros that you use the money for, they remain unsanctified.
The one that says it's really not effective.
Both of them say it's ineffective. Both of them say that the chilul is ineffective. Beis Shammai goes beyond that. We'll stop over here.
That's an explanation. I'm saying just from the words of Beis Shammai, I could say, no, it actually was effective. It's like a tmura, right? Make a tmura.
I hear you. Anyway, that's not the pshat. That's why we're learning the Marafulda, learning Chumash without Rashi, learning Gemara without the classic. You can't learn it.
I'll give you a smart why it should be effective.
The Gabbai is going is.
I'm just thinking. Meaning, you're saying that I can't eat my book. Who says that the Beis Hamikdash is not going to be?
That's it. Here we have a Lubavitcher.
And then I can eat it.
Yeah. The Beis Hamikdash, 15 minutes, the Beis Hamikdash can be built.
Exactly, meaning condition for my Meiser Sheni to be edible, for me to be able to consume it. So today that condition is not there. Who says that in 5 minutes it's not?
That's true. It's edible. It's only there's no Beis Hamikdash. We go build a Mizbeach. 100%. I'm with you, Danny. To be continued.
And when Mashiach comes, we pass like Beis Shammai, right?